How are we to understand the festering sore that is the border between Israel and the Gaza Strip? The answer is next on this episode of The Prophetic Connection. This place, the Mount of Olives, very near fulfilling the prophecy, waiting for the day when the Messiah will come. This morning I'm standing in one of the most dangerous places on earth, and certainly within the borders of Israel. I'm actually standing at Israel's border with the Gaza Strip. And the border is defined by the wall that you can see in the distance. The wall is there to protect the citizens of Israel on this side of the border from sniper fire. But there's another wall that's underground that you can't see, and that's to prevent tunnel building, because there have been attempts in recent years to build tunnels under the walls that would allow terrorists to come through and attack the Israeli communities on this side. And there are houses here, there are people here, there are children playing here who are at risk, even as our camera crew is at risk filming this segment this morning. This is an ongoing festering sore for Israel, because there's almost 2 million people beyond that wall who want to change the status quo. And then you have people on this side, Israeli citizens, who desperately desire peace. This is the struggle of two peoples in this neighborhood, a struggle that cannot easily be resolved.
In August of 2005, and in what was called a determined effort to show the world it wanted peace at all costs, Israel ethnically cleansed the Gaza Strip of Jews by forcibly removing out of Gaza some 9,000 of her own citizens and the soldiers who guarded them. Today, there are no Jews living in the Gaza Strip. Yet this unilateral removal of Jews from Gaza by Israeli authorities, rather than leading to peace, has instead produced incessant and virtually daily rocket barrages from Gaza against Israeli border communities.
Gaza represents what seems to be a never-ending problem for Israel, because the people of Gaza are being taught that Israel is an illegitimate state, that there's no reason for the survival and the existence of Israel, and that Israel needs to be destroyed so that the people of Gaza will have their own homeland. This is not in accordance with the facts, it's not in accordance with God's truth, but because the people of Gaza believe these things, they persist in their struggle against Israel as a modern nation. And that's why this conflict between Israel and the people of Gaza seems like a never-ending struggle, because it's rooted in the hearts and the minds of the people. It's not about borders or simple political decisions.
The problem of Gaza, in my view, is relatively simple, and it's that the leaders there do not want peace. Even before Gaza was taken over by Hamas, which, by the way, that very word Hamas means violence. It occurs in the Hebrew Scriptures. It blows my mind how the Hebrew Scriptures reflect what's actually going on right now. But people talk about peace. Well, to make peace, you need two sides. You can't make peace with one side. I can want peace with you, but if you are angry with me and resentful and hateful, and in fact you actually want to wipe me off the face of the earth, it doesn't matter how much I want peace.
What does Israel need to do to achieve peace with the Palestinians in Gaza?
Israel decided, Ariel Sharon, Prime Minister, that Israel's pulling out of Gaza and giving a piece of land to the Palestinian Authority to let them, rule it. Okay, occupation, no, we're gone. It's yours. No more Israeli soldiers inside. They literally destroyed the Jewish communities that were in there, that had set up beautiful farms on the beaches and everything, pulled everyone out. What happened? Hamas took over, expelled the Palestinian Authority, by the way, injuring and killing a lot of them. It was a mini civil war. And then embarked on a policy of starting to shoot rockets into Israel. thus smashing the myth that it's the occupation. Israel pulled out. So the situation has nothing to do with, occupation. It has to do with one issue that people have to be clear on. And this is not me making a political statement. It's just a fact. It's never been about creating an Arab state or Palestinian state or a homeland in Gaza or Judea and Samaria, which people like to call the West Bank. It's always been just about one issue: the Arab world's inability to live with a Jewish state of any size.
If giving land in exchange for peace is not the solution, then what is?
The solution for the conflict between the people of Gaza and Israel is not primarily a political issue or a problem over borders. It has to do with issues that are rooted deep in the hearts and the minds and the beliefs of the people of Gaza. That's why we pray that God will create a deep transformational impact in their hearts and minds through the preaching of the gospel, and that through their acceptance of Jesus as their Messiah and as their King, their hearts will be changed towards God, their hearts will be changed towards the people of Israel, and true shalom, the one new man of Jew and Gentile joining together in the purposes of God, will be accomplished between Israel and the people of Gaza.
If all peace initiatives fail, will Israeli military forces need to reoccupy Gaza?
Israel made some major moves toward peace with the Gazans. In fact, pulled out a few thousand Israeli Jewish inhabitants with the idea that let's give peace a chance. Immediately, Hamas and its leadership shot rockets against Israel, against innocent lives. And we've seen thousands of rockets come against Israel from that point until today. That would have to stop before there's any solution. And Israel might, for its own security, have to go back in for a period of time.
No Israelis want to be occupying anything, but it might be because they literally have fired thousands and thousands of missiles and are using all the money they're getting from international aid organizations and who's ever giving money to the Palestinian Authority or Gaza. They're using that to build more tunnels, make more missiles. No country, every country's first responsibility is the safety and security of its citizens. When there is no occupation of Gaza, and people forget, by the way, it's amazing this doesn't make the news. If you know where Gaza is, and I can promise you that three-quarters of the people screaming about Israel's treatment in Gaza could not find Israel or Gaza even on a map. They don't realize that Gaza has a border with Egypt. There could be an open border there. It's just the same thing as Israel. Why are you blockading? The Egyptians could build an airport in the Sinai for the Palestinians, and they could go through and land their planes in there, and Israel has no control over that. They could build a port in the Sinai and do the same thing. The answer is that the Egyptians don't want it either. They're dealing with their own Muslim Brotherhood insurrection thing going on there. But because it's Arabs dealing with Arabs, a lot of people don't care, especially on the left, who only get excited about what they view are white Westerners persecuting people of color. Don't get me started on this topic. It's crazy. But it might be, if they keep shooting more missiles at us, and literally, if you go to the Gaza Strip and the farms and the settlements that Israel has within Israel's internationally recognized territory around Gaza, every bus stop is reinforced as a bomb shelter. Every kindergarten, everyone lives in a constant state of terror. A huge percent of the population is living with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from living through random missiles and wars. And so it may be that Israel may have to go in, not necessarily to reoccupy Gaza, but to clean out Hamas.
I really don't think that reoccupying Gaza would accomplish anything other than putting our sons and fathers in an utterly untenable position, because to reoccupy a place that is already filled with resentment and wants to be their own people, without, can you imagine how you would feel if there were heavily armed soldiers walking through the residential streets of your town? It's something that we don't want to do, and it's something that I believe would not help in the least. I do not support that as a solution. I don't think there is any easy solution. I think right now we simply have to continue defending ourselves, and you know, other than a change in the government and the leadership that is now controlling Gaza, and you know, again, I come back to this broken-hearted feeling that I have for the people. I believe that the people are being held in tyranny, and that's really the problem. How do you solve that? I don't think we can just, you know, come in and uproot all of the Gaza officials and you know, somehow instill a healthy situation. So it's really it's what's called a conundrum.
Don't go away. After this short break, Dr. John Tweedy returns with his teaching.
The modern story of Gaza is really a story of a struggle between two people groups. The Israelites, the people of Israel on the one hand, and the Arab nation on the other. Now today they are called Palestinians, but they were not always called Palestinians. That's a recent name assigned to them as their choice of their identity. But they were, before that, Arabs, or the descendant of Arabs, who migrated to the land of Israel, certainly in the late 19th century and into the 20th century. And so today their descendants, called Palestinians, live in Gaza, and their numbers are approaching 2 million people. But to really understand where Gaza is and what Gaza is, we have to go back to the biblical account. And the context is found in the book of Joshua, who assumed command of the armies of Israel from Moses. Now, Moses was old and about to die, and he realized that he needed a successor, so his mantle fell to Joshua. And Joshua didn't feel adequate to step into Moses' shoes. Moses had led the children of Israel, first of all, out of Egypt and across the wilderness, and had been with them 40 years. But we read this in Joshua chapter 1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord, it came to pass that the Lord spoke to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now, therefore, arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, to the land which I am giving to them, the children of Israel. And they came here to the promised land, to Israel. And then God's promise to them, every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given you, as I said to Moses. And then God describes the boundaries of the promised land. Verse 4, from the wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and to the great sea, meaning the Mediterranean, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. Now, Israel today is a very small piece of land at the eastern end of the Mediterranean, but God's designed biblical boundary was to go as far as the river Euphrates, far to the east from here. But history changes things. In verse 5, no man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you nor forsake you. Be strong and of good courage, for to this people you shall divide as an inheritance the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all the law which Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper wherever you go. So Joshua obeyed the word of the Lord, and with the armies of Israel came into what was known then as the land of Canaan. And Canaan simply meant lowland, the lowland by the Mediterranean Sea, along the coast of what today is Israel. And the land was allotted to the tribes of Israel. But when we speak of Gaza, we can be more specific. And when we come to Joshua chapter 15, we read these words. So this was the lot of the tribe of the children of Judah. So this area was given to Judah according to their families. And then the borders are explained. The border of Edom at the wilderness of Zin, southward, was the extreme southern boundary. And their southern border began at the shore of the Salt Sea, known today as the Dead Sea, from the bay that faces southward. And as I move through Joshua chapter 15, the east border was the Salt Sea as far as the mouth of the Jordan, and the border in the northern quarter began at the Bay of the Sea at the mouth of the Jordan. The west border was the coastline of the Great Sea. This is the boundary of the children of Judah, all around according to their families. Now, as we read through in Joshua chapter 15, this was the inheritance of the tribe of the children of Judah according to their families. The cities at the limits of the tribe of the children of Judah toward the border of Edom in the south were Kabzeel, Edar, Jagur. I won't take time to read all the names, but it's very specific. And what is being said here is this is the inheritance of the tribe of Judah. But the important point that I want to stress in this episode concerns Gaza, where I'm standing. Verse 47, Ashdod with its towns and villages, Gaza with its towns and villages, as far as the brook of Egypt and the Great Sea with its coastline. So here we have in the biblical account in Joshua chapter 15 that Gaza and all the cities of this area were being assigned to the tribe of Judah. This was their inheritance in the land of Israel. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the people that live in Gaza today are the descendants of Arabs who migrated to this land in recent centuries. And of course, their families have grown, and today they have a burgeoning population. But their agenda is not to live in peace with Israel. And the sad thing is they are ruled by Hamas, whose agenda is the destruction of Israel and the displacement of Israel. And in a sense, the people, the Palestinians, are to be pitied, for they serve under cruel taskmasters, and if they disobey the rulers over in Gaza, they can be put to death. And so fear stalks the streets of Gaza while Hamas is in control. Now, Gaza was recaptured by Israel in the Six-Day War in June of 1967. And Jews began to migrate into Gaza and to build communities there and to build lives for themselves and their families. And they were prospering. And they took the sterile soil of Gaza and with their inventive ways began to grow crops. In fact, they were developing new crops. But they could only do so under the protection of Israeli soldiers who were also stationed in Gaza all through that time. Now, a decision was made by the government of Israel in 2005. And by the way, as I'm giving this teaching, an Israeli drone is flying overhead. And you can probably hear it in the background. It gives me a sense of safety, because on the drone are eyes that are watching the border area, and there are guards and there are other means of defense. And so my comfort is that that drone is overhead, even though it's not the greatest thing to have when you're trying to film. But back to the year 2005. In a desperate pursuit of peace, the Israeli government decided to pull the Jews out of Gaza. They were a community of some 8,000 to 9,000 people. They were farmers. And that's about all they really knew how to do well, to take the sand of Gaza, turn it into soil, and grow crops that could be exported throughout Israel and to the rest of the world for that matter. But the painful decision was made that it was time for all Jews to leave Gaza. So what was known as the community of Gush Katif was uprooted, actually by soldiers and by police who were taking their brothers and sisters by the arms and forcibly removing them, because the Israelis, for this was their homeland. They didn't want to leave. They didn't want to give up where they had put their blood, sweat, and tears. So they were forcibly removed. And I think even now in the opening decades of the 21st century, that many of them have not even found probably employment because they were primarily farmers in the first place. But the reason that Israel pulled the Jews out of Gaza in 2005, in August of that year, was an attempt to demonstrate to the world that Israel longed for peace, that any peaceful solution they would grab, but they would show the world they wanted peace that much that they would give up a foothold in Gaza. And sadly, peace was not to be, because very soon, under Hamas's influence, and in fact they seized control in January of 2006. It was supposed to be a popular democratic election, but they really just took over. And the rockets began firing more and more until we have the situation today where Israel has had to add new levels of defense because rockets become more sophisticated. And the Jewish people who live here want to stay here. And rockets will not drive them out, for they are determined to stay. But this is the situation. Would you want to live here with fences like the one you can see in the distance, knowing that there are terrorist entities over there who will try to come over the fence or under the fence if they could, and come against you and your family and your children? This is why this is a festering sore on Israel's doorstep. If only the people on the other side of that wall would have a change of heart and a different attitude, if only they wanted to live in peace with their Israeli neighbors. Think about it this way. Imagine that the Gaza Strip on its west side has the Mediterranean coast. Could you imagine if there was peace and hotels could be built and tourists would come from all over the world, because it's still part of biblical Israel, and how they would come with their families and bring prosperity to the Palestinian people? What a different outcome altogether. But it takes two sides to make peace.
Stay tuned for more from Dr. John Tweedy after this break.
The problem that is Gaza today is a painful situation for people on both sides. The Palestinians behind the wall and the Israelis beyond the wall. And I can think of no better way to conclude this episode than to allow the Word of God to speak to the situation. I'm thinking specifically of a Psalm of David when David was in distress and running for his life, and when enemies were chasing him. And the Psalm is Psalm 3. And let me conclude with this, because I cannot do better than the holy word of God. The words of God through David. Lord, how they have increased who trouble me. Many are they who rise up against me. Many are they who say of me, there is no help for him in God. And that's what the nations are really saying today, because Israel seems to be standing completely alone and only with her God to help her. But David's trust is in God. But you, O Lord, are a shield for me, my glory and the one who lifts up my head. I cried to the Lord with my voice, and he heard me from his holy hill. I lay down and slept. Think of the people in these communities as they put their children to bed at night, and as they say their evening prayers, as they've done for thousands of years. I awoke, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people who have set themselves against me all around. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God. For you have struck all my enemies on the cheekbone, you have broken the teeth of the ungodly. And then this, salvation belongs to the Lord, your blessing is upon your people. David expresses his confidence in God The blessing of God over his people, even though he's in distress and fleeing from his enemies. And surely that's a word for Israel today on the border with Gaza. God is with his people. His blessing is upon them, even in conflict, even in terrible strife. Now, in the next episode, we're going to go to the northeast border of Israel with Syria, which is also a place of conflict.